Good morning. It's Monday morning. We have survived Sunday, and most of us have lived to tell the tale. I'm glad to be with you. I had a good day yesterday. I was with my friends, I was with my church, and I was with other friends during the day and evening. And most importantly, I was with Velda, and we navigated our way through yet another day. And I'm very grateful to the Lord for that. Rejoice in the wife of your youth, friends. She's your comfort. She's your reward in this life. She's a gift from God. Men, cherish your wives. I've never been at a deathbed where I had a guy tell me he wished he'd have treated his wife worse or done less for her. Chapter 23, the Acts of the Apostles. We began this yesterday. By the time I did it yesterday afternoon, I was very tired. And I'm tired this morning, but I don't have a fever. And I feel like I'm thinking pretty clearly. And of course, I've had at least 2 cups of Baptist gasoline. I'm not intending to offend our Mormon friends by drinking this coffee, but if you're offended, I can't help it. I'm going to drink the coffee. Now, chapter 23. I just cannot proceed without expressing my sorrow for my friend Steve Youngblood. Pastor Steve's daddy died yesterday morning, as near as I can tell. Good old Hobie, Hobart Youngblood. He was either 86, 87, somewhere in there. Can't remember. Had a long, successful career in business, and he also was a gospel preacher and pastored a church, and was helping out with the church, as far as I know, over there in somewhere between Aurora and Marionville. He was up until he got real sick recently. Can't remember the name of the church, but it's near Aurora. Hobie, they called him. All right, Steve, if you're watching, I know you miss your daddy, but we're old men now too, and you'll see your daddy soon enough. We know where he is. He devoted his life to Jesus Christ, and he spent his time preaching the gospel to a lost and dying world. And great is his reward in heaven. And I know that you're proud of him, and I know how much you loved him. All relationships between fathers and sons are always strained because of the dynamic there. Sooner or later, you got to be your own man, and sooner or later, daddy's got to step back, as you've learned with your own children. That's just how it is. And that tension, that dynamic never really goes away. But none of that matters. You have honored your father, and great is your reward in heaven. I'll send our condolences and our most profound regrets and heartfelt sympathies to our brother, Steve Youngblood, in the passing of his father. Chapter 23 of the Acts. We began yesterday, and so I will just go back to verse 1. This is where Paul gives his defense, his second defense. He tried to give his defense the day before, then they tried to kill him again. So the Roman soldiers saved him from the mob. And now they're in an orderly manner. But they're not letting them all in. They're still bringing Paul out in front of the keep, as we shall see in verse 10. They're what they call the castle. It's the stronghold of the Roman garrison, probably a tower. It would stand several feet above the tallest building in the area so that they could watch the area and see what's going on in the streets. And Paul, earnestly beholding the council, said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God unto this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded them that stood by him to smite him on the mouth. Do you know how to conjugate smite? I learned from Dr. Decker yesterday. You smite, smote, and smitten. Smite, smote, and smitten. And the high priest Ananias commanded them that stood by him to smite him on the mouth. Whap! And said Paul unto them, God shall smite thee, thou whited wall. Comparing him to a tomb, because his brains and inside were dead. For sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law? And they that stood by said, Revilest thou God's high priest? Good morning, dear Susie. God love you. Then said Paul, I wist not, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, Thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people. But when Paul perceived that the one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Of the hope and resurrection of the dead I am called into question. Well, in a way that was true, but specifically he was not. He was called into question for preaching Christ. And when he had so said, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the multitude was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, neither angel nor spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. And there arose a great cry, and the scribes that were of the Pharisees' part arose and strove, saying, We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel hath spoken to him, let us not fight against God. And when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled in pieces of them, I have the mental picture of olive oil being stretched out between Bluto and Popeye. And when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled in pieces of them, commanded the soldiers to go down and to take him by force from among them and to bring him into the castle. And the night following, the Lord stood by him, Jesus, and said, Be of good cheer, Paul. For as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. And I told you my belief. Paul expected to go to Rome a free man and then leave there and go on to Spain. Well, going to Spain never happened, although there are some who say that it did. But I would submit that the gospel was carried there by Paul's servants and followers, or Barnabas' followers, or others. Apollos had missionaries by then going too. They were all going every which way. Jesus said, As you have testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness of me in Rome. In other words, you're testifying here as a prisoner. in Jerusalem. You'll testify in Rome as a prisoner. I want to make clear that from this point on, Paul is never a free man. Now, so we come up to verse 12 in chapter 23 of the Acts. Verse 12. And when it was day, now remember, this is a narrative chapter. I may get through it quickly, I may not, because even though it's not what we call a big theological chapter, where there are a lot of things, where sometimes I'll spend a week in there, you never can tell when the Lord will say, Jimmy, you need to talk a little more about this. And I never know until it happens. It's part of the gifting. Spurred by the Word of God, no matter how many times I've read it. Like if I read it all morning before I read it now, it wouldn't have done any good. It wouldn't have been any different. I'd still say the same things because the words still say the same things. But because of my gifting from the Holy Ghost and from Christ at his ascension, I sometimes know things that I didn't know a while ago. How do I know them? I don't know. It doesn't happen like Kenneth Copeland, where I'm standing on the stage and I go, what's that, God? What are you saying? No, it doesn't happen like that. I'll tell you the absolute truth of this word of knowledge and prophecy and things like that, because I experience it from time to time. The way it happens is you just know something now that you didn't know a minute ago. You just know it. Just like you know that the world is round and that we actually did go to the moon. Of course, there's a large percentage of people who don't believe either one of those things, but most people in the world do not believe in the Christ of the Bible. So there you go. All I'm doing, I would not tell you a thing if it were not true, unless maybe I owed you money and was trying to get out of paying it. Then I might lie. I certainly have a past that would suggest that. But I don't owe you any money. That's one of the beautiful things about my ministry nowadays. I don't owe anybody anything. Nobody's got anything on me, and I'm not taking a paycheck from anybody. I can say whatever I want to say, and I can't get fired. I guess they can cut me off of Facebook. I've been cut off of YouTube a couple of times. But I always think of what Paul wrote to the Galatians. Am I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth? Yeah, you used to love me. How do you like me now? So, I just spent 2 minutes explaining how God impresses upon me to say certain things about his word. And I always remember it's all his word. I'm not, if I didn't have this word in front of me, I wouldn't have anything to say. I'd be just like one of these political jerks that have a YouTube channel that either talk about how great Trump is or about how wonderful Trump is or how awful and evil Trump is. It's either one or the other. And that's all anybody talks about. I've completely given up just about on this very medium that I'm coming to you on because, I want to know what's going on in India. Well, you can't find out by watching the news. You got to read an Indian paper. I want to know what's going on in Australia. I want to know what's going on in China and in Vietnam and Japan. I want to know what's going on in Europe. I'd love to know what's going on in some of the countries of South America. And then in Central Asia, I've taken an interest because of our friends in Lahore, Pakistan. I you can't find out what's going on because there is more to the world than what Donald Trump did today. There is more going on than that. And whether you think he's wonderful or whether you think he's awful, you have the same problem. If you want to know what's going on in this reprisal from the winners of the civil war in Syria right now, where they're killing the Alawites because they're the tribe that Bashir Assad came from, their former deposed president. Well, you got to look somewhere besides the news. I mean, even the BBC has fallen behind in this regard. You have to dig. You want to know what's going on in a certain part of the world, you can't find out about it on the news. None of the cable stations, none of the broadcast networks, nobody will tell you because all they care about is this day-to-day, what they call the news cycle. I promise you, friends, there's a news cycle that's been going on in Israel for for the last 77 years. And it's going to continue 77 years, and it's going to continue to go on like that until the Lord comes. But if you want to know anything about it, I suggest you read the Jerusalem Times or the Times of Israel or some of those other publications, because you ain't going to find out about it here, because nobody here cares about it. We're very Americentric, you might say. Good morning, Amy. God bless you. I hope y'all had a great Sunday. So that said, I will resume. And when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. I believe I would have made another kind of vow, like I'm not going to eat ice cream until I kill Paul, or I'm not going to listen to any Beyonce records until or music until I kill Paul. I mean, I would have given up something easy, but I'm not going to eat or drink until I kill a guy. How do you know when that's going to be? See, these people are already crazy before their big conspiracy even starts. We have bound ourselves with a curse. Your curse is to stay hungry. If you're weak when you kill him, what if he and the soldiers overcome you? Because you're weak with hunger. This is a dumb move. And like a coach telling the football team, we got a big game tomorrow, so we want everybody to skip supper and get drunk and stay up all night. This actually happened in ancient Israel. King Saul, who was fighting the Philistines, and he was chased and they were winning the battle. And he says, if anybody eats or drinks before the sun goes down, that person would die. Well, it only made his army weak, and they did win. But when the battle was over, they fell up on the spoil and committed all kinds of sin and uncleanness and unkosher eating and reveling. Caused Israel to sin. But that's what these morons have done. They have bound themselves with a curse. It reminds me of some of the terrorists today. What good do you think you're going to do if you blow yourself up? Oh, I know you're waiting for rivers of honey and 72 virgins. I'm telling you, friend, they ain't there. You want to come cut off my head because I said that? That's fine. I'll be with Jesus and you'll still be going to hell. Verse 12, chapter 23 of the Acts. And when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. So you can tell from the very outset that they have very little going for them in the brains department. They probably had a lot going for them in the rage department. I'm sure it was part of this mob. Verse 13, and when they were more than 40 that had made this conspiracy, 40 men. Well, if they're not going to eat until they kill him, it might take 40 of them to do it. This has always struck me as funny. It's dark humor, it's gallows humor, it's terrible, but it still strikes me as funny because of the stupidity of it. There is no defense against stupidity. Stupid people can be around you all the time, and all you can do is just endure it and hope that you don't catch what they got. And they were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy not to eat nor drink until they had killed the Apostle Paul, who was under guard by the Roman soldiers. Now here was their plot. And they came to the chief priests and the elders. So they're back at the temple now. And said, we have bound ourselves under a great curse. Oh, great master, worshipful master, architect of the universe, illustrious potentate, we have bound ourselves under this great curse. It sounds like something out of The Mummy. Cucamonga. And there were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy. And they came to the chief priests and elders and said, we have bound ourselves under a great curse, that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now, therefore, ye with the council signify to the chief captain. Now, you higher ups, the chief priest, the Sanhedrin, the council, the temple elite, the Senate of Israel. Now, therefore, this is the conspirators talking. Now, therefore, ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow, as though you would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him. You're going to be hiding behind columns, with knives, like et tu, Brute. And we'll stab him under the... Oh, Susie, you're in church for Bible study right now. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Well, we wish you well and pray for your efforts. Now, therefore, ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he will bring him down unto you tomorrow, so you would inquire something more perfectly of him, concerning him. And we, or ere he come near, are ready to kill him. And when Paul's sister's son, Paul has a sister. Paul's sister has a son. They're not named. Paul has a sister, and Paul's sister has a son. And when Paul's sister's son heard of their lying in wait, he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. How did he get in there? They had to have been a family of some substance. Either that or they were doing business with the Romans and he was making a delivery of some kind. Anyway, his presence was not rejected at the garrison. So he came in and he was able to come to the chief captain. Look what happens here. And when Paul's sister's son heard of their lying in wait, he went and entered into the castle. He couldn't have entered into the castle if they either had to know him or he had business there. And he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. They let him see Paul. Then Paul called to one of the centurions unto him and said, bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. Paul's given orders to the centurion. Maybe he had already converted the centurion. Maybe he had already brought the centurion to Jesus. Wherever Paul was, he was preaching the gospel. He was telling people about Jesus Christ. I've often wondered how many soldiers who were either chained to Paul or guarding Paul over the years got saved just like the Philippian jailer did. Because I don't think you could stay chained to Paul for very long without getting saved. Then Paul called one of the centurions unto him and said, Bring this young man unto the chief captain, the head honcho, the big Magoo, the high Gyrasticutus of the keep. Bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. So he, the centurion, took him, the nephew. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul the prisoner called me unto him and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say unto thee. Look, if they didn't know the kid, he wouldn't have talked to the colonel, the chief captain. They wouldn't talk to him. Because how did they know he didn't have a knife under his robe? How they know he didn't come there to try to kill the chief captain? Security. They kept the mob on the outside, but they let this Jew in. They knew him. As I say, they either knew him because of the prominence of his family, or they were doing business with him and his family, and they were used to seeing this young man. That's how they wouldn't have let him in otherwise, because he was just another Jew to the Romans, or he would have been if he didn't have position. See, sometimes God puts people in position so that they can do his work. By the same way, he saves rich people. If he didn't save rich people, none of the work would get done, because it costs money to take the whole gospel to the whole world, as J. Vernon used to say. It costs a lot of money. Good morning, Charles. God bless you. It's just like that Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. She kept telling Richard Gere every time he'd tell her something, she'd go, It's going to cost you. Yes. It's going to cost me, I know. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul, Charlie, my old friend, Charlie Davis, if you need a used car, go and see Charlie. You can send him a message right here in his direct message in the comments. You can click on say, I need a car. Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong. My short-term memory is bad. It's Never Say No Auto, I think. Anyway, you can find them on Facebook and all over social media. And Charlie is the head of sales there, and he will make sure that you get fixed up. So if you're on foot, go see Charlie. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul, the prisoner, called me unto him and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say unto thee. And so the chief captain took him by the hand, the young man, Paul's nephew, sister's son to Paul. God bless you, Charlie. Then the chief captain took him by hand and went with him aside privately and asked him, What is that thou hast to tell me? The chief captain may not know the boy, but by now he knows Paul, because Paul is a woman. Is a woman. Yes, all the secret's out. I can't talk. Blah, 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 blah. Paul is a Roman, and the chief captain is really treating him good right now because he had bound him. You can't bound a Roman who isn't charged, and he was about to beat him, and you can't beat a Roman that has not been convicted of a crime. The Romans had laws. They were carryovers from the old republic. But remember, at this point in time, the republic has been dead only about 100 years. So the memory, the historic memory of it still lingers. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul the prisoner called me unto him and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who has something to say unto thee. Then the chief captain took him by the hand and went with him aside privately and asked him, What is it that thou hast to tell me? And he, the boy, said, or young man, said, The Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldst bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly, to question him some more, to grill him a little bit more. In other words, to hear his defense again, a defense that they will not believe, as Hosea said, though a man declare it unto you. But do not thou yield unto them, the young man tells the chief captain. Do not thou yield unto them, for there lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath, that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, looking for a promise from thee. So the chief captain then let the young man depart and charged him, See thou tell no man that thou hast showed these things to me. Don't tell anybody you told me. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, 70 cavalry, and 200 footmen, go to guard Paul. The chief captains decided, these people ain't taking Paul. Oh, well, I'm in charge. Not until we find out what's going on. Why? Because he's a Roman. He's a Roman citizen. He may be a Jew. The Jews may hate him because he's proclaiming Christ. But as far as the chief captain is concerned, he's a Roman and he has the rights of a Roman citizen. And he's not going to let this mob take Paul, no matter what. See how differently this guy acted than Gallio did? Or as the magistrates of Philippi, or as the town clerk in Ephesus. They would beat up people. The town clerk showed himself a little better, but this is great. He just says, no, Paul's a Roman, and they're not going to touch him. The guy decides, not on my watch, baby. This chief captain, he knew his job. 200 soldiers on foot, 200 infantry, 70 cavalry, just to escort one preacher to Caesarea Philippi, 2 days' journey. And he called unto him 2 centurions, said, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200, 470 men at the 3rd hour of the night. That'd be about 9 o'clock at night. And provide them beasts. So we don't take him out of here when it gets dark. They're going to think he's going to come down and talk to him tomorrow. Well, I'm getting him out of here tonight. He's Johnny on the spot. He's moving. Good morning, Doug. God bless you. I get my names confused because of short-term memory. You're the guy that plays the steel guitar, right? Lives up in central Missouri somewhere. I see your post where you're playing the guitar. I thought maybe you played the steel too. There's not as many steel players around here anymore as there used to be. And he, the chief captain, called unto him 2 centurions, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, footmen, infantry, and horsemen 70, that's 270, and spearmen 200 at the 3rd hour at night. 470 men to guard one preacher. The chief captain is determined not to let Yes, there you go. Thank you, Doug, for clearing that up for me. I see the pictures you post sometime where you're playing. Sometimes you're playing a telly, maybe, and then other times you're playing a steel guitar. I like looking at the pictures. Thank you. Um, Sheila, good morning. Um, so they're going to take Paul at the third hour of the night. It'll be about 9 o'clock, be good and dark. And provide them beasts that they may set Paul on. Paul don't have to walk, he's going to ride. I like it. Ride, Sally, ride. He's going to ride, and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter after this manner. Claudius Lysias, how we find out the name of the chief captain. And he wrote a letter after this manner. Claudius Lysias, unto the most excellent governor, Felix, sendeth greeting. I like the way the Romans wrote their letters. They put the name of the writer first so the person reading it could see who it was from before they started reading the letter. You know, the English way, and what has come to the United States, is that there's the letter, and you don't know who it's from. You got to look at the end. Unless you know the address, you got to look at the end to see who wrote you the letter. I like this Roman way. Claudius Lysias, unto the most excellent governor Felix, sendeth greeting. This man was taken of the Jews and should have been killed of them. Then I came with an army and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. And when I would have known the cause whereof they accused him, I brought him forth into their council, whom I perceived to be accused of questions of their law, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or of bonds. You see, this was exactly the situation that Pilate faced. You know, the rulers wanted to kill Jesus, but he was only guilty according to their law. He was guilty of nothing according to Roman law. And Pilate says, I find no fault in him. And to please the Jews, he gave them over Jesus to be crucified. Well, good old Chief Captain Claudius Lysias is not going to have none of that. He says, his questions about their religion. He hadn't broken the law. He's a Roman citizen. He hadn't broken the law. And I'm going to save him from the mob. That's what Pilate should have done. Of course, this was all in the foreknowledge of God. Things happened just the way they were supposed to happen. But it shows you the difference in the character between this great Roman governor and prelate and proconsul, Pilate, and this humble chief captain, as I've explained to you, would have probably been on the level of a colonel commanding a regiment in the modern army. The difference between the great Pilate and this humble man here, this servant of Caesar who refused to break Roman law and give Paul over to the mob. Have you ever thought about it that way? I've been thinking about that a lot ever since we started teaching Acts, because I knew that I was going to get to the Acts chapter 23. I knew I was going to get there sooner or later. And I wanted to know exactly what I thought about it before I got here. It says, I would therefore have known, because he was a Roman. And it says, whom I perceived to be accused of questions of their law, he wrote in his letter, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or of bonds for Roman. And when it was told me how that the Jews laid in wait for the man, I sent straightway to thee and gave commandment to his accusers also to say before thee what they had against him. And of course, Felix was the governor. He was in the same office as Pilate was when Pilate gave Jesus to the cross and Barabbas, the murderer, to the crowd. And when it was told me how the Jews laid wait for this man, I sent straightway to thee and gave commandment to his accusers also to say before thee what they had against him. Farewell. And then the soldiers took this letter. They took Paul. Then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. And on the morrow, about halfway, and on the morrow they left the horsemen to go with him. The soldiers returned to the castle. They went far enough until they knew that these men who were trying to murder Paul had not followed them. And so they just sent him on with the horsemen, the cavalry. And on the morrow they left the horsemen to go with him and return to the castle, who, when they came to Caesarea and delivered the epistle to the governor, the letter from the chief captain Claudius Lysias, and when the governor had read the letter, well, let's back up. They came to Caesarea and delivered the epistle, the letter, to the governor, and then presented Paul also before the governor, before Felix. And when the governor had read the letter, he asked of what province he was, and when he understood that he was of Cilicia, he says, I will hear thee, said he, when thy accusers are also come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. The importance of this is he is now in Roman machinery. A Roman chief captain saves him from the mob because Paul is a Roman citizen. He sends Paul to the governor of Judea, Felix, who is in the same office as Pilate was 30 years before. And he's getting sucked up by the machinery. The governor says, well, what province you wrote of? Because what he's going to do is he's going to establish is if the province that Paul is from is whether or not it's in Felix's jurisdiction. If it's in another proconsul's jurisdiction, another governor's jurisdiction, then he would send Paul to that man, because now he is seeking Roman justice. He is a Roman citizen seeking Roman justice. And so the first thing Felix does is he says he needs to find out whether he has jurisdiction or not, or whether it is the responsibility of another governor. I love watching the way Roman law works. You know, Great Britain, England, based their law, the English common law, on Roman law. Our law in the United States, and most of the law of the civilized countries, is based on Roman law and English common law. Although I'm wondering whether we're a civilized country anymore. I've been wondering about that for years. But I would just say, historically speaking, Western civilization is based on Roman law and English common law, especially Great Britain and the United States, and by extension, the entire former British Empire. First thing the Roman governor does is that he makes sure that he has a right to judge Paul, because if he's not in his jurisdiction, he doesn't have the right to give him Roman justice. That would belong to another man, another court, another governor. So when the governor had read the letter, he asked of what provinces Paul was. And when he understood that he was of Cilicia, he said, verse 35, I will hear thee, said he, when thine accusers also are come. That's another part of Roman justice. The accused must have his accusers face to face. And anything they bring up, he has the right to testify against. He has the right to make his case. He has the right to produce and provide witnesses. He has the right to do anything he wants to do in his own defense. He has the right to impeach all of his accusers, impeach their testimony, dispute their testimony, ruin their case. He has every right to do. In other words, they will not give in to the mob. Roman law would prevail. And we see that how strong it was when the military leader in Jerusalem sent him straight to the governor of Judea and said, "This is a civil case. This is not a military case." And so he sent Paul to Felix. It's a beautiful thing to see justice work out. You see it so seldom, even in the United States, maybe especially in the United States nowadays. "I will hear thee," said he, "when thine accusers also are come." And he, Felix, commanded Paul to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. I can't believe we finished that, but we did. And we will be in chapter 24 tomorrow, which I believe is a great chapter, because that's when we find out that Paul is a pestilent fellow. That's what his accuser calls him. The lawyer that they've hired to talk against Paul in the next chapter will say he's a pestilent fellow. That means he's a pest. I want that on my tombstone. He was a pest for Jesus. I'd like everybody to see that, except I don't expect to have a tombstone. I expect to be in glory. I believe the rapture is going to happen any day now. Any day now. Anyway, the Lord is coming soon. You need to be ready to meet him. He might come today. God bless you.